Like, how did you get into book art? How did you start working in that space?
Well, it is really interesting to go back 50 years. And in 1972, I was living in Connecticut and I was part of a group called the Connecticut Feminists in the Arts. And there were several women in that group who were very interested in the writer Anais Nin. And they organized actually a big weekend seminar in a beautiful place on Long Island Sound in Rye, New York, where Anais Nin was the focus of this. And, and she came. And the people she wrote about in her diaries. And at that time, she was, in a way, at the height of her fame after a lifetime of writing but now that her diaries had been published, she was very well known. And I mean, I had known about her, but I hadn't really read read her. But I met her. There were only 30 participants in this workshop, and she was very generous and encompassed everybody. And at the time, I was working in textiles, making these flamboyant performative capes and masks that really a lot of women back in those days, it was the early days of feminism with rap sessions and consciousness raising. So we were all trying to find out who we were, and what was possible, because we were breaking out of the old ways and the old roles that were sort of assigned to women. And in a way, you could say that my work with masks was definitely part of that, because we were masked and unmasked, as we came out to live lives that were really beyond the traditional women's lives, what women's lives had been allowed to be up at that time. So I met Anais Nin, and she was very responsive to my work in textiles. And I did a little performance for her wearing a cape and a mask on the lawn there, on Long Island Sound. The other artists, and there were a lot of other writers and artists at this group too. So it connected me to a kind of multimedia group of artists. And Anais and she befriended a lot of people. She was very generous to me. And she would invite me to come and speak at at the talk she gave at universities. So my friend Susan Boulay, who was a kind of fantasy painter, and I often accompanied Anais in talks. And I showed my slides and my masks, and my friend Susan showed her slides of her fantasy paintings, one of which was on the cover of Anais's fifth diary. And it made me want to join that group of writers, because Anais was such an articulate person, and she spoke about dreams and a kind of whole life that included the senses. And my work with textiles was very sensual and very much involved in the tactile experience. So a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just make a book? Because I was sort of a frustrated writer. Why don't you just make a book out of fabric? Because that's what I was working in. So I made my first book in 1972, and it was called Silky Book. And it was um, really like a sophisticated children's book. It was made out of silk. It had pockets with hidden compartments and secret messages stitched in them. Sometimes I typed on the silk and put that in. And there were buttons and there were things to do in this book, like a children's book, only it was silk. And it had photo transfers that I did. I can't remember. I think I had the photo transfers done for me, but the techniques were stitching and applique and all the same kind of techniques I used, in my sewing, in the capes. And but even in those capes, there were words. So words have always been a part of my work. In the capes, the words sometimes were hidden inside, or they were applique on the outside. I mean, one of the capes said, "Hail to thee, blithe spirit," on the outside of it, in big velvet letters. So the book was a real anomaly. I mean, I didn't know anybody else who was making fabric books at the time. And I showed it in a gallery called the Fair Tree Fine Crafts Gallery on Madison Avenue in New York. And it sold in the first time it was shown. And I have no idea where it is now. I have a few very bad pictures of it. I mean, I don't think I was really documenting my work at the time the way, I soon learned to do. But the book became, it was the first of a number of fabric books I did, each one being a little more resolved, I guess you could say. Because the first one was quite crude. I know I put grommets in the corner and held it together with metal rings. But still, you turned the page, you did stuff to it. It was very tactile, the kind of thing that you felt with your hands and you experienced with your hands as well as your eyes. So in that way, I think it was a very sensual work. And the other textile books I did, some were more conceptual, some were based on like quilt forms, like miniature quilts with text that was typed on fabric and sewn in. And they were all sold. I don't have them. The one that I do have is called Lifebook, and I made it as I moved from Connecticut to California, and it was a kind of fabric photograph album. At that time, I was doing photo transfers using acetone and Xeroxes. So there were family pictures in it. And I still have that book, and I would really like it to go to some major collection, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that kind of leads into my next question. So, like your mediums have kind of crossed over with the book throughout your art. Can you talk about how do you see them as separate? Do you see the different things you've worked with as separate, or does book art feel central to some of those?
Well, book art has I have embraced it and taught it, and then not done it and let it go and then come back to it. There are some things that you just kind of want to have as in a book. I mean, I'm not making books right now. Um, about 3 years ago, I did a series of books. There's miniature kind of books made out of canvas and paint, and they were based on tantric images. And they're like little prayer books, and they're definitely meditational items. So you hold them in your hand, and in a way, they're like prayer beads, only instead of beads, there are pages to turn. So, but I never feel like anything is separate. If an idea comes up that is more of a book, it becomes a book. My most recent paintings have all had words in them. I mean, they're word paintings. That's what I call them. Um, and they're small. One of the things I think I found over the years is in many ways, it's very difficult to show books. And I also love to paint and work larger. So some of the impetus for me to not be making books is that I want to work much larger and I want to paint. And dealing with just a two-dimensional surface is very different, to resolve a two-dimensional surface in a painting with materials is almost easier for me than it is to make a book, where there's all these relationships between pages, and it just takes much longer to make a book. So I don't
Yeah.
feel any different. I put words in everything usually, although I've got many paintings with no words, but words are really essential to me. It's like joining that group of artists who were around on East Nin, and I met a lot of writers and became close to many, many writers. And about 20 years ago, I met a poet named Christine Hemp, who was she's become a very good friend of mine, but she also was very influential in teaching me about poetry, which of course is about a lot about metaphor. Um, but she also understood my work. So the connection between symbolism, metaphor, and poetry just deepened my relationship to words and deepened my relationship, and well, actually to everything, you know. I mean, language is what we have. Um, Maybe before anything else, I don't know. I mean, I think we have touch before we have anything else.
Right. I think that I've seen, I think you just mentioned it. And also I read, I was reading on your website that bunnies on ice, that and
Yeah.
other experiments.
Yeah.
You've talked about how those have derived from like meditation or kind of the ritual practice. How do you see ritual in meditation in your art?
Oh, I think it can be really, really important. Now, that bunny came to me at a time when my husband was dying, actually, and I somehow I had an hour or so out, and I bought this little rubber rabbit. I mean, it's like 2 inches high. I paid 50 cents for it. It was like nothing, but it was something to focus on. There was something about the rabbit that I liked, and I drew it every day when I had a few moments to myself. I just drew that rabbit, and that became a daily ritual. And after my husband died, of course, I was very connected to the rabbit because it was something, this little bunny figure was something that had kind of gotten me through a very difficult time. Um, when you're just focused on one thing, that's how meditation is helpful, because your mind is just focused and you drop all the other noise. Um, And so I ended up with a kind of grief journal, which was really just a succession of pages with a drawing of a rabbit, this funny little bunny, and the date on each page. And after my husband died, I mean, it was a major life experience, a first really close death that I um, dealt with like that. And I had the bunny, and I wanted to do something with the bunny. So the bunny stayed around, and I drew it along with my husband's shaving brush and um, other things that had a sort of meaning. And then as time passed, it's like everything, you go through your grief, and you come out always with it, but in another area, because the person who died is still with you in this other way. And so the bunny wanted a broader expression. So I took those drawings, and for that book, Bunnies on Ice, I put them into other settings. I collaged them into other settings because I wanted to make a book of just the drawings. But I tried a lot, and it just didn't seem strong enough, as if maybe the little drawings were very strong to me from the experience of having done them in that time. But they fit into all other settings. And then, and then I found this little plastic uh, rabbit that was missing an ear. Oh, please, oh God. And that's my bad bunny. So then I took on the bad bunny, and I thought, well, I can use that bunny, to get to the darker side. So, I mean, that's like, developing an alter ego. So the bad bunny is in some of my work too. So in a way, you can see the progression there from needing to focus and using drawing as a way to focus, and then taking it into another aspect. Another meditational thing that I've done and that I did for years in my workshops, which was very successful. And I introduced a lot of people to this idea of just lines, drawing lines. So I'd have people gesso a newspaper, just newsprint, and we just use newspaper. We put gesso on newsprint, one page, so it's like 18 by whatever the measurement is, and then we would be very, very quiet and focused and start to draw lines, just parallel lines across that paper. And by the time you finish, you're either in love with the line and you have really come to be centered in yourself, or you haven't allowed yourself, you know, that that calmness. You're just frustrated. But I'm, for the most part, people in the workshop really got into it. And then we would put all these drawings up on the wall. And it was so fascinating how they look together and the variety of them, the quality of each person's line. And we were mostly using pencil, but some people would use a heavy pencil and some people would use a light pencil. And they were just parallel lines. But a line can be so expressive. And so that's another meditation. Um, it's a really good technique. So I've known some people who come to those workshops who've continued that. And if they find they're in the studio and they can't concentrate, they let themselves do lines. And I also think another meditational thing is just to draw the same thing every day, the first thing you do. You know, you save a sketchbook just for that. And you just do the drawing in the sketchbook. And after a while, you've learned how to draw something, then you might change the object. But that is a very good meditational thing. And what you have at the end of, say, a year of doing that is a kind of a drawing journal, really. You know, you can follow your own mind through what you chose to draw. Like that.
I love that. That's,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you still have the little bunnies?
I have the little bunny. I can get it and show it to you.
Do you keep do you have you ever gone back since making the book? Have you ever gone back to that practice or moved on to other kind of
Yeah,
meditation practices?
I have moved on. I did have a show called Why the Bunny um, at a gallery called Ocopolis, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was, you know, in the Art Murmur in Oakland for years. And I think that show was in 2009. I'm not sure. And in it, I showed all the related bunny work I had, including a 6 foot high drawing of a bunny, a big bunny holding, you know, a woman, and as a bunny as a comforting creature. And my bad bunny was there too. I mean, there are a lot of different aspects to that bunny work, which I did for about 10 years. And I'm not doing it anymore, but I I still love the bunny.
That's I love that. It's very cool.
I also
Um,
work with a Buddha image, so the bunny and the Buddha together seem to be a strange anomaly, but they make sense to me.
it somehow feels right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk about adding text to your work, both in books and in other forms?
Well, the text often just kind of arises when I'm making the work, mostly because um, most of the books that I think I've focused on are canvas and paint. So that's a different kind of book than like if you're a letterpress printer, for instance. If you're a letterpress printer, you're probably going to use a lot more words than I do. Um, because of that medium, you know, I mean, you've got words, you want to express them and you're setting them in type and printing them. My words, I think sometimes they arise from music I'm listening to. Sometimes they come out of a poem. Sometimes it just happens that I have a title and a word, the word grows from it. So most of my books are not planned with text. And those, the tantric meditation books, the prayer books I told you about, they have very, very few words in them. And I think those, they're stronger without the words because they allow the viewer to let their own words arise from it. So that's interesting because the next series I did are these word paintings, which are all words, you know. So I'm even if I might think of myself as a a frustrated writer in that I'd like to write because words are so important to me. Um, I don't plan them ahead of time. You know, the most writing I do is when you have to write an artist statement, you know, and you want it to be just so. And I send it around to my sister and to my friend Christine and to all the, you know, the great writers and editors in my life to fix it up.
It's so interesting that it's not planned.
Yeah,
That's-
it's not planned. Like I think one of the best Canvas books I've made is called Psychic Research. So I liked the title, Psychic Research. And then I also realized that there are all these experiences in your life which you really quite can't explain. You know, they're well, you could say surreal, but they're sort of psychic in that they happen and you don't there's no real reason. It's like you know more than you think you know, then you know you know. So this book developed in that way. And if you can, the text on this book comes in various forms. Some of it are letters cut out of canvas that have been applied to the page and then painted over. Now, some people think they're embossed. I mean, that is an incredible technique, but you can imagine that's very time consuming. I'm not going to have a lot of text done like that, or, you know, my hand would just break from cutting the canvas. Um, so the main body of this text is in these cutout canvas letters applied to the support, the canvas page. Then there's another level of text that's way more detailed and wordy that I typed, or that, well, I did it on the computer and printed. And that text was printed on paper and kind of shellacked and glued to the page. So it's a subtext.
oh,
So many people will read that book and never actually take the time to read the subtext. You know, it's a big canvas book, so it's like 48 inches across. So the pages are like 24 inches by 18 inches. So it's a big book. Anyway, I realized that you can read the book just by reading, you know, the big canvas words, the applied words, or you can get deeper into it and read the subtext. Or you can just look at the visual of it and see if I was essentially successful in communicating what psychic research is about, you know. So in that way, I started off with psychic research and these categories, which have some things about dreams, and I can't remember now the bigger aspect of it. And then I did some research to write the other things, you know, that are in there. But I think most people have not really read the subtext in that book. And there's another book I have. I can't remember the name of it. It's kind of like an autobiographical book, but oh, it is the book no one wants to read is what it's called.
oh,
And in it
interesting.
is a rant. Now this book I did write, and it's a really negative, horrible thing. And in the end it says, that you could never get out of that book, that you are stuck here. And it's about all the bad things. I'll just use the first person that I did in my life, you know. And it's an incredible rant, and it's handwritten in paint on canvas, and it's a very dark book, you know.
There is something about a rant though that still feels very like of the moment, kind of not really planned.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But some people would read that book and say, "Oh, you didn't really mean that, did you?" And yes, I did. Because, I mean, the things you've done, that you wish you hadn't, or, looking back, were not your best moments or good choices. They're always with you in your life. I mean, you can forgive yourself and hope other people forgive you for your slights or whatever. But those moments are still there, and they're all captured in that very dark book. And, these are books I made when I lived in Taos, New Mexico, um, in the 90s. And I mean, I sold a few of them, but I still have most of them. And that the canvas books, um, they're very durable. I mean, they don't look any different from the day that I made them, even though they've been handled by many people. That's one thing I like about that form. They're not delicate books where you have to wear gloves.
Um, yeah. Do you have time for one more question? Is that okay?
Sure.
Um, so the last question I had was that I read that you were writing about how you're interested in the world and finding your place in it. And so I feel like your books are kind of pushing the limits of what a book can be in some ways. And I was wondering if there's a connection between those two things.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think as we go on, life is such that you have your experiences, you learn from them, um, you learn new things, you want to learn more, and travel is one of those things for me. I've been fortunate to, especially now, you're looking back, you realize, oh, I was really fortunate to get to a place like Azerbaijan or um, um, Burma, places like that, which have opened my eyes to the world. And my sister lives in Thailand, so she, in a way, I've traveled in Asia with her, and that has been, really eye-opening for me. And I think that, being able to travel and then come home and assessing what it was I saw and how it relates to my life here or our life here. Whenever you go to another place, you feel part of it, and it just expands your world. So I think I would say that bookmaking, like traveling, and a book almost always comes out of a trip for me. Uh, just because you see and learn, I see and learn so much. I want to explore it that's how the Buddha came into my work, because traveling in Thailand especially, the Buddha is everywhere. And I came to love those Buddha statues, and they meant so much in terms of compassion and wisdom, and their aspect in the landscape everywhere. So in a way, I brought that feeling home with me, and I've explored that a lot. So I do think that bookmaking opens the world in a way. Yeah.
That's very beautiful. um, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Another book right now.
Yes. Do you think you'll come right now? You're not working with the book, but are you thinking of, do you think you'll come back to making another book? Yeah.
Of course I will. Yeah, right. Yeah, no question. Yeah. So I like to see what your books are like.
Oh, thank you. I'm starting to explore photography a little bit in my work. So seeing where that goes, I think.
Did you see, have you seen my book that's in the Mills collection? It's called I've Moved. It's a big photography book.
I don't know if I've seen it, and we can't get in there now. It's
Oh,
closed, I know.
oh, yeah.
So, but I'm adding, I have a list when it does open up,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I hope it opens up soon, and I hope it's been helpful to hear my trajectory. I mean, I feel like the book arts community has been really a home for me because, for one thing, there's something very friendly and sharing about the book arts community, and which I can't say I have found among the painting community, but maybe that's just because I came to the painting community a little later. But I always feel a bit outside of the book arts community because my work doesn't involve traditional binding or paper making or printing. That I took it into canvas and paint. Um, mostly because of my own interest in the tactile qualities and just kind of what I wanted to explore.
I do find that, I do find that very inspiring to kind of be working out of the regular binding form. So
Yeah.
I
Oh,
appreciate,
right. Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.